Pacific Ridge. PEX is the symbol on the TSX-Venture. And this company is focused on copper gold porphyries in BC, 5 copper gold porphyry projects in the portfolio currently. And I wanted to invite Blaine on to give a rundown of what the company's current focus is and the financing that's currently underway. So can you just start with some high level, and then we'll dig in a bit deeper, Blaine?
Sure. Well, a brief overview or history of Pacific Ridge. It is one of the oldest companies on the Toronto Venture Exchange. It was taken public by one of my mentors, John Brock, in 1971. It's always been focused on early stage gold, copper, uranium projects in Canada. In 2000, we shifted from gold projects in the Yukon to copper gold porphyry projects in BC with the acquisition of Kliyul. And we acquired that from Centerra. And since that time, we've made it clear our goal is to become one of BC's leading copper gold exploration companies. And we certainly achieved that goal. We now own or control 5 copper gold porphyry projects. It's, I think, one of the best porphyry portfolios in all of BC. Our goal is to become the leading copper gold exploration company. And really the thesis is pretty simple. And we've seen this play out since we initially acquired Kliyul in 2020. Increased demand due to the electrification of society plus heightened political risk in Central and South America is going to lead to a lot more competition and interest for these sort of projects in BC. So I think we're ideally positioned with our portfolio. We've had a lot of success with our Kliyul. We had optioned, which is our flagship. We had optioned RDP to Antofagasta, which recently dropped it. And we're now raising some money to drill Chuchi. Kliyul is still the flagship, but I really believe that Chuchi offers a wonderful discovery opportunity, a la Hercules Silver Hercules or American Eagle's Knack. It has seen historic drilling, but most of that's been pretty shallow, about an average of 150 meters in depth. We completed ZTEM there in 2022 and an IP program in 2023. And we can see or believe that we can extend that mineralization to depth. And if we're successful in doing so, that would be a brand new discovery. And I don't necessarily care what's happening in the market. If you can come up with a brand new copper gold porphyry discovery in BC, you're going to get recognized for it.
And, what is your background, Blaine?
Yeah, I got my start in the trenches. So I've been involved in mineral exploration since 2001. I started off as a little IR guy with a company called Wheaton River Minerals, which was a shell that Frank Juster acquired in 2001. Ultimately, that became Goldcorp, which was acquired by Newmont. So I got my start in 2001 in mineral exploration and rose through the ranks to VP corporate development, and now I've achieved the title of CEO. But I've been very lucky to work with a lot of good people, a lot of good projects. 5 of the companies I've worked for have been subject to M&A. So I know what success looks like. I know what it takes. And that's why I joined Pacific Ridge in 2021. I took over the role from Jerry Carlson, who is now the chairman.
Okay, got it. So you're currently doing financing, trying to raise about $2 million. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we closed a small financing in April, about a 1.75 million financing. And that was to fund ZTEM and MT at Kliyul. So Kliyul is a flagship. Since acquiring it in 2020, we've completed close to 20,000 meters. We drilled, we had our biggest ever drill program there last year, close to 11,000 meters. And the last few holes indicated to us where we could find higher grade mineralization or a porphyry core, which is yet to be identified, but it's likely to be deeper. So we want to make sure that we refine these targets before we go back in. It's beyond our depth of investigation right now. So I believe it's prudent to complete the ZTEM and MT to see deeper, to refine those targets before we go in. So that's what that financing was for a ZTEM, MT, and a mineral deportment study, which is kind of like a low-level metallurgical study at Kliyul. And this financing, this $2 million financing, is for Chuchi. We're planning approximately a 2,500 meter program. It'll be our first ever drill program, but as I mentioned, it has seen historically some drilling. It does have a historical resource. I'm pretty happy with the grades. There's a number of targets, but again, the real upside here is if we can extend that mineralization to depth, and I believe we can.
So at the flagship, it makes sense to do the ZTEM and the MT, because if you are going to find that porphyry core there, it's going to be pretty deep. Just, looking at the section maps there, and obviously it has seen a pretty good amount of drilling already. So if you're gonna put millions of dollars more into really testing this thing at depth, and it makes sense to do that preparatory work. So I understand that. So turning to Chuchi, you put out news release on April 30th explaining this porphyry corridor or trend there, and it's pretty clear that you have a pretty big chargeability anomaly there at depth that that has only been just sort of grazed by the work that's been done to date. So tell us about, you get this 2 million, from the financing, and then what's the timeline there at the Chuchi project, and how many holes will you drill, and sort of what's the objective of this program?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'll talk a little bit about our finances right now and the additional capital we'll raise in this financing and what that means. So, as mentioned, we did close that 1.75 in April for ZTEM and MT and mineral deportment study at Kliyul. So, the ZTEM will start first. That's likely to start sometime mid-July at Kliyul. And we'll wait for those results before we start the MT survey. At Chuchi, we're shooting for a mid-August start, so a little bit later in the season. And why we want to get started a little bit later there, wildfire risk is a big problem in BC. As a matter of fact, we had planned to drill Chuchi last year. We had the budget for it, but we were unable to because of forest fires or wildfires. So we'd like to get started a little bit later because the wildfire risk should be a little bit lower, as we move towards fall in this part of the world. So we'll start with ZTEM in July, followed by MT at Kliyul, and drilling is likely to start at Chuchi sometime mid to late August and end, towards the end of September. And in addition, we will be planning a small IP program at Redton. It's very much a secondary project, but it does adjoin Northwest Copper's Quanica on the eastern boundary. And it's a small program, and it's really just to keep the claims in good standing. So all told, it will be, a half-decent exploration season. ZTEM MT at Kliyul, inaugural drill program, our first ever drill program, 2,500 meters and, approximately 4 holes at Chuchi, and an IP program at Redton. So we'll be pretty busy this year. Not as busy as last year, but still pretty busy.
So the program at Chuchi will start at the end of August, you said?
I say mid to late August. Yeah, that's what I'll be telling our drillers. That's right.
Okay. So the focus of that program is the Coho zone?
Well, that's one target. So, when you look at Chuchi, it's a very large project area, and it is essentially comprised of 3 big claim groups. So you have, we'll just call it Chuchi proper, which we optioned from Centerra in 2022. Then last year, we optioned Chuchi South and Chuchi West from American Copper and a prospector. So it's a very big land package. There are a number of targets, but when we're thinking about this 6-kilometer long porphyry trend starting in the north, you kind of have like the Digger and the BP zone. And the BP zone has seen the most amount of work. That's where you have that historic resource of approximately 50 million tons, grading between a 0.2 to 0.4 copper, a 0.2 to 0.4 gold. Right now, that will be kind of our immediate focus. Yes, it has seen some drilling, but it hasn't been drilled to depth. Again, as you're sort of saying, just really skimmed. The average depth of the holes is only 150 meters. the work we've done, the ZTEM and MT, or pardon me, the ZTEM and IP indicates to us that we can extend that to depth. So that's going to be a big focus of this initial drill program. But as you move south, you get to the Coho zone, and that's in the Chuchi South claim group. So that's very intriguing also. I mean, you have some great surface samples. You've got, coincident with a nice IP anomaly. It's never been drilled. If we are able to drill that target this year, we'll do it. But I think because it is our inaugural drill program, we'll sort of start in the known areas before we push out into the unknown. Unless, of course, the budget is there to stick in. I wouldn't necessarily call it a wildcat hole, but it's, a higher risk hole. You've got a lot of good data there. And obviously, if you can come up with some good results, that would be, a brand new discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So that is compelling. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what stuck out to me. But yeah, there you've got three pretty prominent target areas there at Chuchi. So just help me get a better handle on where this project is at. What's the current interpretation of this porphyry system? Is it interpreted to be multiple porphyry centers, or is it so far just one porphyry deposit, and you're trying to get a better handle on the zonation?
Yeah, I'd say it's all of the above. I mean, porphyries do tend to occur in clusters, and going back to say thinking about Kliyul, I mean, we have our Kliyul main zone, and there's a number of other targets, and we tested a few of them last year. And I think the ZTEM and MT is going to help us, perhaps find some other interpreted porphyry centers. And that is typical in these sort of environments, these porphyry systems. You have a cluster of them. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing at Chuchi also. I mean, you just have one area that's been the focus, and that's the BP zone. But you have other areas that have seen limited testing, or through the ZTEM and IP are indicating, additional porphyry centers. But again, I think we'll start kind of with the known and then push out from there. So definitely, first off, we'll be starting in the BP zone and looking to push that to depth. There is another area. It's kind of just a little bit to the north. Well, let's just call it northeast, and that would be kind of the digger zone. It's kind of on the shoulder of the BP zone. Then you have another zone called the claw zone, which would be kind of west northwest of the BP zone, and then of course moving south, you're getting into that Coho. But then, in Chuchi West, there's another target that has never been tested. So there are a number of interpreted porphyry centers, the BP being the most advanced.
So at BP, I see your chargeability model view, and I see the first planned hole, and that hole seems very logical to me. So you're testing what could be the potential ore shell of the porphyry there, and you're also testing an area of high chargeability, and then the transition to the moderate chargeability, and you're pushing it deeper than it's ever been, tested previously. So that seems very logical, and that hole should give you a lot of information. So once that hole is drilled, what's next? Is the second hole set in stone, or could you change? Okay.
Nothing ever is when it comes to drilling. So, I mean, you have an idea and you have a plan, and your geologists are always kind of working on that. I think in your first hole, you want to be, starting relatively low risk, because it is our first program there. So you want to sort of get a handle on it. We'll actually be going up to the project, not next week, but the week after, myself and our chief geologist, Paul Jago, who used to be with Centerra and actually had drilled this project with Centerra, and Danette Schwab, our VP Exploration, and some other corporate visitors. And we'll be going around to take a look. So I'll be excited to get up there and get the boots on the ground and, get a better sense of exactly what we're looking at. But it'll be the same for Danette. I mean, she hasn't been on the project area. Paul is very familiar with it. So, I mean, you have your plans where you think you should go, but ultimately, I mean, it always changes. All you can sort of know for sure is what your budget is and how many meters that might give you. and ultimately where you might like to test, but you have to be flexible.
Okay. And let's just talk about grade, because I see, hole 9027 tagged into 194 meters of 0.21% copper and 0.21 grams per ton gold. I mean, that's a respectable porphyry hit in BC.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's going to set the world on fire if you drill another hole like that, but it certainly is pretty solid. It's a good foundation. What kind of grades do you need to see this year to say, we've really got something here. Let's go big.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look at it two different ways. I mean, if you're looking at kind of the highlight holes that have been drilled here, say that one you're talking about that was drilled in, 1990, 194 meters of that 0.21 copper, 0.21 gold. That was in the BP zone. And another one at BP was, like 106 meters of 0.33 copper and 0.19 gold. And again, that was drilled in the same campaign. Then in a following campaign in 91, there was, a 229 meter interval of 0.1 copper and 0.61 gold. I think all of those grades are fine. I think the real key here is the widths, right? The lengths. I'd like to see us be able to take those sort of grades to depth. And, I think if you can report those sort of grades over 3 to 5 or maybe even greater widths or lengths, then it gets exciting. And one of the other advantages here, say, versus Kliyul, is that it is road accessible. It's at lower elevation. It's only 35 kilometers away from Mount Milligan. And so your costs are lower. So and as also your season is longer. So there's a lot of reasons why, I'm very interested in this project. And I've always said that. I mean, I think Chuchi could be one of those sort of projects that could become your flagship in a number of different scenarios. And there's a lot of different reasons to test it. And one of the reasons why I'd really like to test it this year is that, number one, I believe it does offer a fantastic discovery opportunity based on the exploration work we've completed. I believe we can push that mineralization to depth. And if we can, again, a new discovery. Second of all, it's the only project we don't own 100%. We did option this from Centerra, so we do have exploration expenditure requirements to be made. We need to drill it this year. I don't want to run the risk of losing it because I do think it offers that discovery opportunity. So we had planned to drill it last year. We were unable to because of wildfires, so we just reallocated that drill budget to Kliyul, which enabled us to drill more meters and expand the mineralized extents of Kliyul from 760 meters to 600 meters north-south to 650 meters in depth. So, yeah, great. That's good news. But I still would have loved to have drilled Chuchi last year. And again, I think it offers great discovery opportunities. So that's why we're raising the money. Let's stick some deeper holes in there. And if we can come up with similar grade, but over greater widths, that'll get exciting.
And just, what are the terms of the option agreement there?
Yeah, so we, because we hadn't spent, weren't able to drill last year, we have to spend another 1.8 million this year. So that's basically what we've budgeted this campaign at. So that keeps the agreement in good standing. Then I believe it would be another 3 million in the next season, next year, to get to a 51%. And then it's approximately another 5 million after that to get to 75. So it's basically 10 million in exploration to get to 75%.
Okay, so there's no lump sum payment at the end?
No, there's a small amount of shares.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like a pretty good project to me.
Yeah.
And it's pretty attractive.
Well, ultimately, this is a project that kind of got orphaned. I mean, this was being advanced around the same time as Mount Milligan, located close by. So, a similar timeline. And then essentially Mount Milligan just kind of got the horsepower to keep pushing forward, and this kind of got left behind. But again, it's a big project, lots of targets. You already have a pretty well-defined area to focus in on that has a historic resource. And again, if you can push that mineralization deeper, you could in theory, push that resource out quite a bit more and continue to look to grow it in other areas.
Okay. So, yeah, I think that's a good overview of the company's projects and plans for 2024. What about, let's step back a little bit and talk about corporate strategy.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously your share price has been under pressure in recent weeks. I see the filing of a large shareholder selling. So, the market cap is, let's say, 10 million, 11 million in Canada. How does a company with a $10 million market cap advance 5 projects? What's the strategy there?
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit about what has happened, because I think that has created an excellent opportunity for potentially interested shareholders, and we did see that actually. So, yeah, our share price was very much under attack week before last. We traded over 30 million shares in a couple of days, and the silver lining of that was that there were shareholders and investors buying all those shares. So I think if our company and our projects and our people weren't as attractive as they are, our share price could have been ground down to dust. But there are people willing to step up and buy those shares. So it's always disappointing to see some of your shareholders leave, and big shareholders leave for lots of different reasons. But I'm glad that there are new shareholders that viewed that as a compelling price. And I believe as we continue to move forward and execute on our plans, our share price will rise. I think this is, a temporary lull. I believe in our strategy and our thesis. I think companies that have projects like these are going to continue to be highly valued. So I think it's a short-term blip. I think we'll continue executing the plan as we have, and that is to become BC's leading copper gold exploration company. I would say, though, I think we're pretty full up right now in the project portfolio. We do have 5. I would say 3 are our focus. Obviously, Kliyul is a flagship. Right now, Chuchi is most certainly number 2. RDP is number 3, and just last year, Antofagasta was completing its 2nd drill program at RDP. So and they just recently dropped it. So there's been a few things that have happened recently that have helped suppress our share price. But again, I think we've got a great portfolio of projects. I think they're going to continue to become more valuable. And, we're not afraid to option out non-core projects like we did with RDP at Antofagasta. If someone were to come along and make an offer on any one of our projects, we would certainly entertain it. Our other 2 projects, which are secondary, like Redton and Onjo, don't cost that much money to maintain, i.e. what we're doing this year at Redton. We're spending $100,000 on some IP to keep the claims in good standing. And even though Redton is a secondary asset, it is strategic still in the sense that it does adjoin Quanika's eastern boundary. So I think at some point in time, it's going to make sense for something to happen there. Onjo adjoins the western boundary of Mount Milligan. So again, and it looks like the trend extends onto our ground. So again, I think there's the possibility for something to happen there. So when you think about our current project portfolio, I think we're well situated. I wouldn't be terribly interested in making additional acquisitions in BC. If other opportunities were to present themselves, in the southwest of US, whether like in Nevada or Utah or New Mexico, Arizona, it's something we'd look at, and it's something we've always looked at. I mean, we've always said our goal is to become, well, first off, one of BC's leading copper gold exploration companies, and we've achieved that. Now the goal is to become the leading copper gold exploration company. But if we could find some other assets that are road accessible, have better seasonality, and are located somewhere in the States, we'd take a look at that too, because I mean that still fits into the portfolio. We are a copper company, essentially. The projects we've been focused on are copper gold porphyries or gold copper porphyries, but we'd be open to looking at just strictly copper and other styles of mineralization in different geographic jurisdictions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it might not be a bad idea to look to the south. I really like that first hole at the BP zone at Chuchi. I'm pretty excited for that one. So, can you give us a rough timeline of news that investors can expect from the company over the coming months?
Yeah, the news cycle is going to be starting up here pretty soon. I think we might start with kind of, an overview of our plans for this year. Now knowing that essentially, we've secured the funding for Chuchi, so maybe an overview exactly what we will be doing, when it will start. We'll probably close the financing in tranches. We're at about 1.6 million right now, so we don't have that much more to raise. And essentially communicating to the market that, well, listen, we're almost there. So don't worry. And then essentially you'll see news of starting up, the ZTEM at Kliyul and why we're doing it and where we see the potential. Probably then moving forward with the IP at Redton, then of course the start of drilling at Chuchi, and then initial results. And for Chuchi, maybe you'll put out a hole at a time. So in reality, we are just right at the start of the news cycle, which is always good.
Okay, great. If anybody has a question for Blaine, please ask to speak, and I'll activate your speaker link. Yeah, so I think my final question is the big seller done? And who are the largest shareholders of the company right now?
Yeah, I think the largest, I think that seller is done. There was actually a 15 million share cross, and I'm curious to know actually who was the buyer. But I may never know, because that was kind of a strategic number. We have 151 million shares issued, so crossing 15 million shares means they're not actually an insider. So unless they call me up or I get some intel from the street, I'm unlikely to know. But as far as that one seller, yeah, I believe they're gone. I won't know that for sure until I see some filings. It may come at a later date. Unfortunately, also we saw Centerra sell some shares, and now they're under 10%. So I'm not entirely too sure what their plans are moving forward. Our other largest shareholders would be Delphi, a German fund. They own about, now they're under 10%. They owned about 13 million shares. Then there's some large high net worth. So some of our bigger shareholders were exiting at the same time, which created obviously a lot of pressure on the share price. But frankly, I'm glad that's done, because then it enabled us to, announce a financing, which I think is very attractively priced in good terms, to drill a project that I think offers excellent or fantastic discovery opportunity. And it would have been very hard to do that financing or complete it if you had announced it and then all of a sudden you saw all that selling. So I'm glad the selling is done, and I hope we have a floor here and onwards and upwards.
Yeah, I bought some shares at 7 cents a week or so ago. I guess I bought from the big seller. Yeah, I mean, I think at a $10 million market cap, it's pretty attractive.
Well, and
So
essentially,
I'm willing to take a shot.
look at it another way too. Right now, Robert, I mean, essentially, we are priced where we were prior to Kliyul discovery, prior to acquiring RDP and optioning it to Antofagasta, which also returned some fantastic results, prior to acquiring Chuchi. So we're being priced right now where we were with just having Kliyul in our portfolio.
Okay, great. Thank you, Blaine. I appreciate it. This is a good first step, having this conversation, which will go up on my YouTube shortly at Goldfinger Capital. And I look forward to doing more of these throughout the year and as you get into the program at both projects. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Have a good one. Ciao.
Cheers.